which the state is afraid of and state doesn't understand. Today's global denotified community are Palestinians. Palestinians are Arabs, surrounded by all Arab countries, but there is nobody coming to their rescue when the genocide is going on by Israel. We all sit quiet. I don't know how many of you watch Al Jazeera or WION to see the tremendous tragedy and destruction that is going on in Palestine. And why I remember Palestine, it has something common with his poems. Because it discusses land. It is land which is in question. In so many poems there are references to land and land ownership and land possession and land cultivation. I don't know how many of you have heard Donald Trump saying that let the entire Gaza Strip be cleared, it will become a land for resorts. So it doesn't matter if Palestinian people, Arabs are killed, because we want land. So Palestinians are now globally denotified Banjaras. And we all see that, tolerate it. The only time we saw live killing of Iraqis was in 1991, when the Americans bombed Iraq virtually into ashes. And I remember this Palestine also because when Professor Pawar referred to America and black poetry, I don't know how many of you have heard of Wounded Knee. I don't know how many of you have heard Wounded Knee. Wounded Knee is a small, very, very small village, like one of the Banjara villages in which he has described the small community in America in South Dakota. Sometime in the 19th century, you all watch Western films with somebody coming on the horse with the sunset there, the hills there. He goes on that horse, comes close to some so-called village, finds a bar there. He enters the bar with his guns, looks around and shoots some people straight. We don't understand why he's shooting, who is shooting, and what is he going to do. After some shooting, he comes out of the bar and says, this land belongs to me, and that sheriff comes and declares that the land belongs to him. Wounded Knee, sometimes, somewhere in 1880, 1890, was that small village in which some such Western film, which we see, Clint Eastwood and everybody, came and just massacred the local people who were later on known as Red Indians. Then it was changed to Indians. Then it was changed to Native Americans. Today it is known as Native Americans. These Native Americans or Red Indians or Indians, 95% of them were killed between 18th and 19th, killed straight, and the land made clear and occupied by these Western imperialists, who were neither local, in Donald Trump's definition, they also had migrated to US. And they were clearing the land because they saw it such a huge land with such little population. So the great population is a nuisance. Kill them. That issue came up in 1973 when the newly aware Red Indians or Indians or Native Americans decided to expose the massacres and brutality of those who occupied their land, those Native Americans came and said, we will go to this, that Wounded Knee place, that village, and we will occupy that. We will occupy Wounded Knee village. That was in 1973. In February 1973, they went and occupied the village. Richard Nixon was the president. Henry Kissinger was the security advisor. And America was still, like Donald Trump, thinking in glorious terms of how the West was won. How America became America. The Make America Great Again is not new project. Make America Great Again was immediately after Columbus landed there. So Nixon told the army that see that those people are occupying that entire village called Wounded Knee and we must clear it. By that time those villages of Red Indians, Native Americans had occupied the whole village and said, we declare Wounded Knee as a nation. Nation within a nation. We are a separate nation. That's a treason. So Nixon ordered army. When the army went there, they realized they cannot kill all of them. The entire village stood. And by that time, perhaps you remember, the students in America had begun their movement against the war in Vietnam. So they also protested in universities and college campuses that you must respect autonomy of the Wounded Knee village. Marlon Brando was the actor. You must have known Marlon Brando surely, because if you have seen Godfather film, he is the Godfather, Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando realized that he must support them because the Western films have glorified the aggression, the invasion, the brutality and the cruelty and the occupation of that America. So we have done it, so we are also criminals, not just army, not just police and not just those white people who invaded. We are also guilty. So he said, therefore, I am not accepting the Oscar which was given to him for Godfather. And that is how Wounded Knee came into the consciousness of the world as a representative case of so many people like Banjaras all over the world who do not have any nation, who do not have, as I said, any religion. They don't belong to any caste or creed. They don't even have, generally speaking, common God. They don't have specific idols. Banjaras are like that, they are people, the human beings, to which he makes so many times mention of you, human beings, even in his preface and in his poems. So those human attitude, that human attention, that is so much present in all his poems that when I read them, actually I heard them. While reading, I heard them. Sanjeev sees anything he reads in paintings. I am a student of Marcel Macron, who says that sound is the most important thing. And therefore he says, civilization began to decline after TV came. Till radio it was okay, because radio was sound. Just to give that instance so that I am not making myself too abstruse. Which caste or which religion or which creed or which language or which god Tarzan belonged? Tarzan was with all kinds of animals, including snakes, all kinds of monkeys, all kinds of tigers, and he was speaking with them, he used to speak with them. Tarzan may be an imaginary figure, but actually there are people like that, there were people like that. Those people Burroughs admit, and that's how he invented Tarzan. But the point is, Tarzan did not belong to any specific community, and yet when that Jane comes, if you recall the story of Tarzan, she finds he is a human. And that's how he is brought into the so-called mainstream of human civilization. If you are not read Tarzan, please read. Of course, there are objections to that nowadays, because Africans feel that they are humiliated in that. But I am not looking from that point of view. I am saying that Tarzan could be understood by that simple sound called ah, because sound was important. In fact, sound is the main thing, and therefore I would request Veera to put this in actual tunes on podcast. Some of the poems at least, you can put them on podcast so that you can hear that poem. You know, the difference is when you read anything, prose or poetry, you read in certain format. Each line has a certain kind of words, some structure. Each line in prose and poetry has a structure, and it goes like this. You turn the book and it goes next page. But in sound it is not like that. In sound you just have a continuous and total picture of whatever you are saying. So the same poem which is read and expressed in tunes or in sounds makes a different feeling, makes a different expression. That is why you will find the simple example you can study for yourself. Take any song that you are very happy with or you like, any song from Hindi films, anything, Mera Juta Hai Japani, anything. You read like this, put it aside and put it on the tape, put it on record. The whole thing changes. The entire meaning changes of that particular poem. Once it becomes a song, it changes. And once it acquires tunes and the entire musical system, it makes a completely different scenario. People complain nowadays that students like you don't read, they are continuously on mobile. I don't exactly criticize unless I know what they are listening. So it's all right if they listen. But you'll find also that globally, not only here, whole of Europe, America, for that matter Africa, all of them are listening, and primarily they are listening to music. They may be listening to anything else, but I think 80% of the audience on mobile phone is the poetry. They are listening to poetry, sung and modified. And therefore I think sound becomes so important and so meaningful to interpret poem. You don't have to give a lecture or make a comment on that poem, what it says. It says through sound. I think you will accept my suggestion and put the book on not just podcast. Don't read the novel. Sing the poem. In fact, now suddenly audiobooks not so popular in India, but audiobooks are getting all over the world very popular. All the classics are being put there. Shakespeare is put there. And interesting thing about Shakespeare is that in one of the libraries somebody went and said, I want Shakespeare's plays. So that librarian said, there is nothing like that. Then that librarian was asked, how can you say Shakespeare's plays are not there? Then that another assistant librarian was there, and he said, Shakespeare's plays are in the poetry section. Which is a fact. All the students of Shakespeare know that it is actually poetry. And Shakespeare's plays actually, even if you are reading a kind of a mystery like Macbeth or Hamlet, it is poetry in actual sense. So I think that is how it should be understood in terms of these poems. For instance, I agree with Sanjeev. He has written two Vasantrao Naik. I knew Vasantrao Naik very, very well. I was a journalist throughout his career. I interviewed him, I met him, and also later on with Sanjeev Sudhakar Naik, his nephew. At that time, for the first time, he became Chief Minister in 1963, and he was Chief Minister until 1974. The only Chief Minister who survived straight for 11 years despite 3 elections. Today we don't know who will be the Chief Minister tomorrow.
Even after election is over.
Even after election, election don't matter, Chief Minister changes. And those who are not Chief Ministers behave like they are Chief Ministers. So that makes it more confusing. Because all Deputy Chief Ministers today are behaving like Chief Ministers and wanting to be Chief Ministers. They are preparing all kinds of games to become Chief Minister. So I came to know about community called Banjara when Vasantrao Naik became Chief Minister. Then I did not know, and later on that issue came, when the Bandhara community, and there was a problem in the Bandhara Commission, who should get the reservation? Bandharas or Banjaras? So when Gopinath Munde came, I was told he is Bandhara. So I asked Gopinath Munde, what is the difference between you and Vasantrao Naik? He said, no, he is from Pusat. I said, I am not asking that. I said, I am not asking from where he is. You are a Bandhara, he is a Banjara. What is the difference? What is your different profession? How do you handle your, do you marry Bandhara community to Banjara community, and what is your food habits are? And which part of the region you occupy and what you do? Are you all farmers? How many of you are farmers? Like today they are discussing this could be about a slight digression, sorry. But the Kumbis were considered as below par by the Marathas. Marathas would not marry a Kumbi. That was about 30 years ago. Even today, much, 30 years ago. Marathas thought if you call them Kumbi, it is below dignity, below par. Some historians say Shivaji was a Kumbi. As a result, many of the classical Marathas removed Shivaji's photos from their house because he's Kumbi. I know family who did it, so I'm telling you how it is. Now, Marathas are demanding that we should be recognized as Kumbis because Kumbis have been granted reservation status by Mandal. Now, what is the difference between Banjara and Bandhara? I asked and they could not answer. Then there are Kodis, Mahadev Kodis and Kodis. There are 4 Kodis. Only 2 Kodis are recognized, other 2 Kodis are not. You may say I am talking sociology, but his poetry is sociology. I am not talking sociology. His poetry is sociology. In some poems, he writes about the isolation that they suffer from. Now that isolation is what? It is not just denotified tribes. Isolation is an expression of alienation by a society and by the state, a total alienation. And that kind of isolation or alienation from the state and from the society creates a new community globally called the disposable people. There are so many disposable people. They are not required. We abolish caste and all, no exception. Ladies and gents who work inside the gutters and inside the drainages, inside, not just on the streets, they belong only by and large to 1 or 2 communities. Nobody says that reservation should be such that all those communities, so-called senior, superior, they also should have reservation and they must have that. 30% reservation should be those Brahmins or forward caste or whatever who should work in gutters. 30% must. That kind of reservation we don't seek. We seek only reservation within reservation. We do not demand any forward caste to go there. Why I said his poetry is sociology? Because the description that he gives of the Banjara community and when they work, he has given about work also. That work you will, I am a sociology student, so I can think only in terms of sociology. one realizes that we are only one nation, whether there is one election or not is immaterial. One nation, one election, one religion, one leader, one prime minister, one everything. That is different. We are, if you go by Korean community, not one nation. According to Anthropological Society of India, we are 5,000 major castes, 25,000 subcastes and associated castes. Anthropological ASI, they have published 74 volumes of Indian caste system, in which they have given all this Vanjara, Vandara, everything, and they have tried to identify how they live. In Maharashtra alone, Ganesh Devi was supposed to be here. In Maharashtra alone, Ganesh Devi has identified something like 360 dialects. Now his dialect, Vanjara, I have not read Marathi, Vanjara dialect that he speaks may not be necessarily understood by Sadashiv Pete in Pune. Not the fault of Sadashiv Pete in Pune, because what Sadashiv Pete in Pune speaks is not understood by many. So it is a question of multiple dialects, multiple communities, multiple castes and multiple cuisines. There is a big sociologist, Louis Dumont. He wrote a book called Homo Hierarchicus. In that book, actually he had come here in India, and I happen to be a journalist, so I had attended his meeting. He said he studied caste structure so much, he visited all kinds of villages to find out who belongs to which caste and how they live, what do they do, what is their profession. And he said, well, there is no caste Mahar in Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Kashmir. Mahar caste doesn't exist. Here, Mahar caste exists. And he says, but all Mahars are not Ambedkarites. All Mahars are not New Buddhists. 52% of the Mahars, according to him that time, were New Buddhists. The other 48% were non-Buddhist Mahar. Then he further said that Matan and Man, they do not necessarily accept Ambedkar. So despite so much Ambedkar all around us, there are Dalits, further Dalits, who are not necessarily following Ambedkar. Now, I am saying this is not to tell you how limited Ambedkar is or how limited our understanding of India is. Because if 25,000 subcastes included are there, Dumont said that I go to, you give me any food, and I will tell you which caste woman has prepared it. Because in each caste there is a separate masala. It is caste wise and region wise. So Mayavati's Dalits, who call themselves Ambedkarites, but they are not Mahars, they are Charmakas. Now, those Chamars or Charmakas of Mayavati supported Ambedkar philosophy do not recognize Indian Maharashtrian Ambedkarites of Prakash Ambedkar or Ramdas Athole or Namdev Sar or anybody. So both of them Ambedkarites, but they don't recognize each other because Ambedkarites of Mayavati are different. Similarly, Yadav. Lalu Prasad Yadav and Mulayam Singh Yadav may not eat in the same plate. That's the level of integration of castes. So it is not a question of one nation, one religion, and things like that. They are completely mythological ideas, not even utopian, let me tell you. They are not utopian. Utopia doesn't recognize this. Utopia recognizes Tarzan, who doesn't have any specific religion. So the point I am trying to drive at, and I am going away from all the interpretation and cultural expression that Ashwini gave and Sanjeev gave over poetry, so I don't want to repeat some of the points which they have given. I totally, entirely agree with that. But I think it is necessary to understand that when the principle started with America, I thought today, in today's world, in 2025, we are living in a world which is totally disintegrated. So disintegrated that we don't know. He chained some people who had migrated to US illegally, but he did not do the same thing to all the migration people. He did only to some in India. To other Mexicans also he did not do it. So he also recognizes that some people are different than the others. Now, why I am mentioning Trump and why I am mentioning this is because even within Africa or within the Arab land, why all Arabs are not coming forward to support Palestine, I am still not sure. If all Arabs unite and say, hands up, America will not be able to do a thing. But they are not doing that. Because they are also not united as Arabs. It is easy to appreciate the film called Lawrence of Arabia. It is not easy to appreciate the wild discrimination within the Arab community, which is happening and killing Palestinian people. And that's why we find that today's world is disintegrated so much that we cannot imagine what will be the situation, say, 50 years from now. They say by 2047 or 2050, we will become 5 trillion economy. You can become 100 trillion economy. So what? What about the society? What about the people? It's not the size of the economy and how many trillion dollars are in the country. It is with the people. And if you have to respect the people, that is human beings, it is necessary that we go through literature. Because it is literature which defines you and me. Otherwise there is no definition. Otherwise there is not, we don't understand each other if there is no literature. Poetry is form of literature. It is literature, it is music, it is plays, it is novels, all that bring us into some kind of a community. That's a new, genuinely understood community. Remove literature and you will become just a land for creating resorts for Trump. It is literature which unites the people. That's why his poems were translated in English. I could understand them in English like I am reading in Marathi. I did not feel like I am reading it. That was the credit of course, the translator, Ajay Deshpande. Excellent translation, fantastic translation. So I did not find it as if I am not reading Marathi. And the same is true of most of the good literature which is translated in multiple languages. We can associate with that literature. Otherwise, why should Shakespeare be popular here? No situation in Shakespeare's play matches here. No situation matches of Thomas Hardy's stories or novels here. And yet, the maximum attendance today was to Sound of Music in Bandra. For 1 month with orchestra they played. Ticket was 15,000, 10,000, 5,000, 2,000. The lowest was very few, 1,000. But the maximum tickets sold were 5,000 above. So people who were not necessarily very rich but wanted to see that and wanted to hear the Sound of Music original, direct, because they were performing, directly performing, the orchestra was live, not cargo attack. So why that happens is because we feel some kind of unity. Unity in Beatles, unity in Elvis Presley, unity in, everybody, Bob, and we can relate, those situations are not same. And that is why I feel Veera's poems will be appreciated across the board, it doesn't matter whether they are familiar with Banjaras or whether they are familiar with the community or whether they are familiar with India. They can appreciate it because we can also appreciate, as the principal said, the black poetry. If we can understand black poetry, we can understand Veera's poems. Because we can relate ourselves to all those people who have become disposable. Because we are all disposable, so we can relate to the disposable people, their sentiments, their feelings, their understanding of life, and through what? Through literature. So the reason literature is that no other animal or no other bird or no other species has literature. They say humans are divided by those who can smile and animals don't smile, which I think is not true, as Sanju will tell you. All Sanju's animals smile. The moment Sanju enters his house, all animals in his house start smiling. So point is, the difference between a civilized or a good human community is those who understand literature doesn't mean you have to be literate. Songs are not necessarily understood only by literate people. Songs are understood by completely illiterate people also. Completely. So literacy is not required to be necessary part of literature. All songs, all bhajans, everything, Dhaneshwar never wrote Dhaneshwari himself. That was written something like 200 or 300 years after Dhaneshwar passed away or took Samadhi. They all were spoken. They were the voice culture. That's what Marshall McLuhan says. The entire early literature globally was a spoken literature. Even our literature is known as Maukik Parampara. It is Maukik Parampara which defines literature. So that is the relationship between literature and society. And for uniting truly the humanity, we have to promote the sound and the voice through poetry, voice through all kinds of literature. And I wish great luck to Veera, and I will read next time when I get the Marathi copy. But even then, I am not feeling deprived of not having read Marathi. Thank you very much.